Huh? About my wife? Never received a dollar with that n. Stop playing on me. You better go ask them what go on with over there. Or whatever the thing going on. My little n got slaughtered this morning. I ain't got no time for you. The wrong with you, man? I'm on different time and I'm not living in a different world. And yes, I am real demanding with a real illness. I ain't crazy.
He said it plainly, and nobody missed it. Now Yaya pregnant, gotta make her get rid of it. This ain't the time, I told you no. One bar, one name, and the room went cold. It didn't sound like metaphor, it sounded like a private argument pushed onto a beat. Minutes later, Yaya Mayweather wrote the opposite. She isn't pregnant. 2 sentences, 2 realities, and the gap between them is where this entire story lives. When a line is that specific, listeners don't hear clever wordplay, they hear a door opening into a moment they were never meant to witness. That tension between a lyric that hints at pressure and a denial that refuses the premise is the spark for everything that follows, because if both are true in different ways, something heavy happened off camera and the music simply spoke first. The line matters because of who is involved. Yaya isn't just an ex from a long ago chapter, she's the mother of one of YoungBoy's children and the daughter of Floyd Mayweather, a man whose brand is built on control, precision, and never letting chaos set the pace. When YoungBoy names her, it isn't a random shout-out tucked into a verse, it's a live wire connected to a family with a global last name, and to a history the public already recognizes. Yaya answers fast and firmly, not pregnant. The lyric, however, sounds like a real conversation where timing and emotion collided, and someone tried to steer the outcome. That contradiction doesn't resolve itself just because one post says so, and the people orbiting the situation don't wait for a press conference, they draw lines in the sand, each one louder than the last. That's when the temperature jumps. Tina, the mother of YoungBoy's wife, Jaslyn Michelle, steps in and makes her position crystal clear. No means no, find your own man, get help. Those aren't hints, they're boundaries, said out loud. Yaya doesn't back away. She pushes right back and questions the foundation of the marriage itself, calling it nothing but signatures on paper. Suddenly, the story isn't only about a supposed pregnancy, it's about status, respect, and who has the authority to speak inside his house. The conversation moves from what happened to who belongs where. A deeper, sharper conflict that can't be solved by a comment thread. Once a marriage is pulled into the center, everyone understands there are stakes that won't be settled with a clever caption. None of this arrives in a vacuum. Their names have collided before, sometimes loudly. In 2020, a confrontation in Houston turned into a case that followed Yaya for years. She avoided prison through a plea arrangement that required good behavior, community service, and distance from the woman on the other side of the incident. The paperwork is dry, but its meaning isn't. Consequences, boundaries, and a court-ordered promise to keep the temperature down. Add the shared child, old tattoos that once made headlines, and the many times their timelines re-intersected, and you get why a new lyric with her name doesn't feel abstract. It feels like a continuation. It's why some listeners hear the line and think, not of clout, but of a pattern that refuses to stay quiet even when the adults try to move on. On paper, YoungBoy's life looks more settled than it used to. He married Jaslyn in Utah, put a ring behind the relationship, and turned the center of his world into the home, the studio, and a tight circle. Long stretches of recording and releasing show a man trying to live in a routine without letting the outside spill over the fence line. Yet steady paperwork doesn't erase pressure. He is young, hyper-visible, and pulled in a dozen directions by history, responsibility, and the expectations of people who want a version of him he can't hold for long. Music remains the only constant. When he can't say something in a room without lighting a fuse, he says it on a record and lets the syllables carry more weight than most conversations. That's how you end up with a bar that feels less like art and more like a message with names attached. There's also the part people joke about until they remember it isn't funny, the family tree math. Older profiles count 10 kids. Newer discussions say 12. Some swear a 13th is on the horizon. Each number means more schedules, more homes, and more choices where someone feels pushed to the edge by calendars, emotions, and expectations. When a lyric mentions a pregnancy and a push to end it, whether recent, past, or misread, the weight doesn't sit on one person. It lands on the whole tree, including the spouse who wears the ring, the child Yaya shares with him, and everybody who now has to decide what gets said, what gets ignored, and what gets handled, quietly for the sake of peace. Yaya's denial complicates the narrative without clearing it. If she isn't pregnant, the lyric becomes either a window into a past conversation, a metaphor stretched too far, or a bar built from assumptions that should have stayed private. If she was asked to end a pregnancy at any point before, the sentence reads like regret. If she wasn't, the sentence reads like an unfair burden placed on her for the sake of a song. Either way, the effect is the same. She's pulled back into the center, right beside a marriage that is now being measured by silence, and any move she makes will be judged as proof of something. That's the trap of a public life. Denials don't always close doors. Sometimes they just move the argument into a different room. This is where the Mayweather factor becomes impossible to ignore. Floyd has spent a career proving that preparation beats chaos. He has defended his daughter in public, hired the right people at the right time, and kept disasters from turning permanent, but a last name can't control what a lyric unleashes. If people decide that a pregnancy ended because of pressure, rumors suggest it, but there's no receipt, the splash doesn't stop at Yaya. It skims across Floyd's name too. Because family stories and brand stories are welded together at the headline, that's the risk inside one sentence. It sets narratives in motion that cost real reputations even when the facts aren't settled. And because YoungBoy uses music as a pressure valve, every bar about family becomes a potential headline for 3 households at once. The marriage sits at the center of a quieter debate. On the record, it exists, the paperwork is there, and the date is fixed. Off the record, Yaya's comment paints it as a formality. People read that and project their own experiences onto it. Some think a ring changes everything, others think it simply adds pages to a relationship that still has to be built day by day. Jaslyn hasn't issued a statement, and her silence is being read in a dozen directions at once: poise, strategy, hurt, focus, or just a refusal to play a game that turns private pain into public content. Silence can be strength. It can also be a shield while people figure out what to do next. Take a breath and separate what's certain from what's cloudy. Certain, YoungBoy is legally married to Jaslyn. Certain, Yaya's 2020 case ended in a deal that set strict conditions. Certain, the lyric exists exactly as quoted. Certain, Yaya said she isn't pregnant. Cloudy, whether a recent pregnancy ever existed. Cloudy, whether pressure played any role in any decision. Cloudy, whether the marriage is only signatures, as Yaya implied, or something deeper that simply stays off camera. Facts live on paper, feelings live in music, speculation lives everywhere in between. The human part gets lost quickly, so put it back at the center. If you strip away the last names and the follower counts, you see the shape underneath. A young father using music to process hurt, 2 women navigating each other's presence around him, and a family elder whose influence can shield people but can't rewrite time. That shape is messy and familiar. Most families know what it's like to argue over private choices, to sit through holidays with complicated seating charts, to use short sentences because long ones might break into tears. The difference here is that microphones are involved, and microphones turn normal conflict into a permanent record. That's why restraint matters. That's why boundaries matter even more. From here, 3 paths make sense. 1. Silence, no response tracks, no posts, no interviews, just a decision to end the loop by starving it. 2. The music answers. Another verse reframes the bar as metaphor, explains the context in a way that dulls the edge, or doubles down and accepts the fallout. 3. A statement written for permanence, the kind of paragraph managers and elders bring to the table when they need the room to stop spinning, short, careful, and built to close a door. Each route has a cost. Silence invites guesses. Music invites analysis. A statement invites scrutiny. The grown-up choice is whichever protects the most people with the least new damage. There's also a 4th path that people overlook because it doesn't make headlines: boundaries, therapy instead of timelines, calendars instead of clapbacks, checking in with the people who share your last name before sharing anything else. Families grow in quiet, repetitive work that nobody uploads. The child at the center of Yaya's story doesn't care about bars, paperwork, or trending topics. He cares about routines that make him feel safe. That's the measure that matters, even when everybody else is tempted to measure wins and losses like a scoreboard. As for the lyric, hold it like a photograph. Meaningful, but not the whole room. Artists tell the truth all the time, but they also compress, protect, exaggerate, and confess at angles that keep them safe. A verse can be a diary entry, a defense, or a dare. It can be regret disguised as bravado, or tenderness hidden in a harsh line. Treating it like a sworn statement will always let someone down, because the world outside the booth is bigger than 4 minutes and a hook. Music is where feelings go before they're fully formed. That's why songs can heal and why they can also harm when names are included. There is another angle worth naming: art as therapy. For years, YoungBoy has poured raw moments into records before he has language to process them in conversation. That isn't an excuse for confusion. It's an explanation for why the music sometimes feels like a first draft of a feeling. When an artist writes from the middle of a storm, lines will carry rain. Some will age into truth, some will be corrected by tomorrow. Listeners can hold space for that without turning every lyric into a legal claim against the person on the other side of the song. Responsibility doesn't live on one person here. If the lyric was unfair, the grown thing is to correct it without inviting another round of damage. If the denial is accurate, holding that line without escalating the fight is a kind of strength too. If you love someone who is famous, you eventually face a choice between explaining yourself to millions or protecting your peace. Choosing peace isn't weakness, it's a skill. It's also the only route that turns headlines back into a household. So where does that leave the question at the heart of this? If you believe the song something heavy happened and the timing made it unbearable, if you believe the denial, this is a case of a bar creating a storm out of nothing. If you believe both, the truth is that everyone involved has been carrying too much for too long, and the music simply cracked under the weight. Whatever the case, the rule should be simple: keep private decisions private, and stop turning real people into plot points. That's not how you build trust, and it's not how you keep a family from breaking under the glare. Maybe the calm arrives tomorrow. Maybe it arrives in a month. Either way, the best ending looks the same. A household that doesn't feel haunted by last year's headlines, a co-parenting rhythm that treats every kid like the center of the map, and a ring that means what it says, whether a camera is pointed at it or not. Until that ending shows up, the most honest position is also the least dramatic. Separate receipts from rumors, respect the people involved, and let the song be a song instead of a verdict. One line started this, but one line doesn't have to finish it. The people inside the story still can, by choosing conversations that actually solve problems, drawing boundaries that keep the kids out of crossfire, and letting the next chapter be boring on purpose. Boring is underrated. Boring is peaceful, and peaceful is what everyone says they want, even while they're lighting matches. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to not miss any other celebrity gossip. Thanks for watching.